Hi, I'm Frances Katzen, and welcome to my podcast, The World of Real Estate. In this series, we will explore the world's largest asset class and how it plays out on a global scale. I'm really excited to welcome my guest today, Kirsten Jordan, the first woman member of Million Dollar Listing New York, an amazing mom, a fellow colleague at Douglas Elliman, and a great person. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great to have you. Let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, I have a really interesting story because I was born in the Midwest. I was born in Minnesota in St. Paul.
Wow.
I lived in the middle of nowhere for the first 10 years of my life in the sticks of St. Paul, like outside of St. Paul. And then my parents got divorced and we moved to Westchester, New York. My dad stayed behind and I went to see him during the summers and on vacations. And my mom moved us out to Westchester, New York with her new husband. And so we were like a blended family. It was really crazy. There were 5 of us.
Whoa.
I have a stepsister, a half-sister, 3 full biological siblings. So there's 5 of us. I'm the oldest of 5. And it was crazy. It was a wild. So that was 10. I was 10, and then until I was 18, I was in Westchester, and then I was all over. I went to school in Wisconsin. Then I lived in Italy for 2 years after living in Chicago for a year, and then came back here and started being a broker.
Can we just go back for a second? What is it like coming from the Midwest going to Connecticut?
Well, Rye is on the border of Connecticut.
Oh, sorry,
so yes,
Rye.
yeah,
That's
Rye.
just-
So it's the same thing. You're basically on the border of Greenwich, and it's totally different. I mean, first of all, coming from the Midwest, you're just so nice and you're so naive, and so you are never sarcastic and snarky, and that isn't necessarily everything that Westchester is, but Westchester is so close to New York City that my mom would always just be like, oh, it's because we're so close to New York City.
So there was always a little bit more edge and cynicism in the responses. Ooh,
Yeah,
big shift.
big shift.
Where in the city do you live now?
I live on 103rd and Riverside Drive, so I am way up there, borderline suburbia. We had a moment where we thought when we were having our 3rd child that we should leave the city, and instead of doing that, we decided to go to the edge, is what we call it.
I love it up there.
Yeah.
I think it's this bucolic suburbia in the city.
Mm-hmm.
So what's kept you here? Is it the brokerage that's kept you here? Meaning, what do you love about it? What's held you here?
Well, the brokerage has definitely kept me here because whenever I try to leave brokerage, it like rears its ugly head and like pulls me back in, because I think the longer you've been in this industry, the more the experience you have builds on itself and the referrals and the network gets deeper, and you reap the fruits of your labor in a much more fruitful way. And so I had moments where I thought it wasn't the right thing for me, and I'm so thankful that I held on for dear life during those years of being pregnant in between pregnancies, pregnant again in between pregnancies, and pregnant again.
I've been there. It's brutal. Those swollen ankles as you walk up those stairs, bumping into people with your tummy. It's the best. It finally feels we've made it through this pandemic. I think that's fair to say. And the city is starting to roar back. What are you most looking forward to about this reopening for you?
For me, it's clearly events are going to be really exciting. I think for our industry, it's really nice to get together, not only with colleagues, but be able to really see clients in person in a larger setting where you don't just have to schedule one meeting at a time. And then I'm also looking forward to the actual real gatherings like the seminars and actually being with a ton of people in one place, like a stadium seating, and being able to enjoy that energy again.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about your home and what makes it special?
Well, as a New York broker, for me, what is New York is pre-war architecture. I love the fact that we have the access to that we do. And so the apartment that we chose has high ceilings. It has views. It's really, those pre-war spaces and details that made me love it.
I love pre-war because it's never going to be replicated.
Exactly.
There's a history to that, I think, and the quality of plaster versus sheetrock. You're a great broker. and you are now a cast member on Million Dollar Listing New York, and not least a mom of 3 gorgeous children. How are you doing it all? Everybody wants to know that, right?
Well, that is the question. Everybody wants to know how I'm doing it all. And I think the question is I'm definitely not the one doing it all. I've definitely worked and figured out ways to outsource what's necessary. And it's such an evolving process of figuring out what really needs me and what doesn't need me, and how to give everybody the right amount of attention and being as present as possible, which is really, I think, what we're all striving for, is deciding where we need to be and making sure that when we're there, we're super present instead of everybody getting a half-assed version of ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle between the 2 that I have and the work, and also making sure I'm cooking and preparing, and we outsource too, but it's not the same when you're not there as much, you know?
Yeah, and parenting is something that can't be outsourced, so
nope.
It's really how much parenting is really necessary for kids to be okay, and how many people can you bring into your life, or how much family can you pull in, that's willing to be a little bit present. I mean,
do you have that?
I've been fortunate that I have family that, because my dad didn't get to be with us as much when we were growing up, he actually rents a place in New York City. And so he comes a couple of weeks out of the month and spends time with his grandchildren, which is wonderful, because that's something
full circle.
My husband's Italian. We don't get that from his family, so it's been really...
That's tough.
Yeah.
Because Italians are big into family.
They are big into family, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I hear you. My family's overseas, so it's really tough. You have been on a different team. You have been on different teams throughout your real estate career, but recently made some very big moves by changing firms, which we're really happy to have you at Douglas Elliman, and starting your own team. Congratulations. What do you most like about running a team, and what are some of the challenges you have faced?
Well, let's just say one of my superpowers is that I'm very naive. And one of the things that kept me from starting my own team for a very long time is, I think, what they call broken wing syndrome, which is this idea of saying, like, it's so much easier in this situation where I have somebody else who takes all the risk and I can just focus on my craft, right? And at some point for me, that was just taking too much of a cost. It was, it's a costly thing to be on a team if you really have your own book of business. And at some point I had been doing enough of my own business that it made sense to say it's time to really look at yourself in the mirror and realize that you definitely can do this yourself. And what I learned from being on teams over the years was, of course, how to refine my craft and how to see what it takes to be successful. And what I learned from my team leaders is that there is no replacement for hard work, there's no replacement for market knowledge, and there's no replacement for leaving no stone unturned and really servicing your clients. And I think that a lot of brokers who are on teams who aren't ready to take that next step are still looking at their team leaders, not understanding how much they're really still working their butts off to be able to make sure that when you get the leads and you get the referrals that you've been spending the last decade or 2 decades to be able to get, how important those really are, and how you're going to be constantly revising and refining the systems to make sure that everything's taken from start to finish. So I've had definitely a ton of surprises starting my own team. And
In what way?
I think, well, first of all, I think we all have very high standards for ourselves. I have a very high standard for myself. And I think that finding talent that reflects that is the hardest part.
Very tough.
And I have great people. It's just more that clearly I hold myself to a standard that's like 175% of reality or normalcy. And a lot of people joining teams are at, that 75 to 90% of, where they probably need to be to excel.
Do you find that the younger brokers coming in expect it to be like the show, where they literally turn a key, make 6% and wear a fancy suit, when really they have no idea the amount of ramp up it takes to get to that? And I think the idea that there's this instant gratification, I think that good things take time.
Yeah.
And I think that we are seeing a shift in the understanding of work. And I think teams fall into that, which is what is your expectation of a team and what is your goal from the team?
Yeah.
So I hear you on that.
It's
and finding people that are in cadence with your methodology, your way of dealing with people, your honesty, your integrity. And it's not just about servicing themselves, but more about the team-centric nature of contribution, which gives a very different energy to the team. That sounds very out there, but I do think it changes it.
Also, setting up a team structure is something that varies team to team. And every team has their own way of distributing leads, and every team has its own way of making there be a structure of whether there's buyer's agents and selling agents that are separate, or, the idea of keeping it so lean that everybody's servicing everything. And then I've seen it sliced up so many different ways. And what's also so interesting, and I know that you've been in the business long enough to see this, that the business has changed so much that it went from being like you could have a right hand, which is what I did for the first 5 years of my career, was being the right hand to a top agent who basically there was no marketing director and operations person and the shower and I was everything. And that was expected. And so I think when I started hiring for the first time, I hired an assistant. I expected that hybrid person to exist. And the truth is they don't exist anymore.
They can't do it.
They can't do it. There's also so many more layers to the industry than there ever have been. And so we're running these mini companies, and there's so much more manpower that it takes to do a deal that I think on a daily basis, I'm so frustrated because I say, like, how is it possible that it takes this many brokers to change the light bulb? Like in the sense that how is it possible that taking this many hands to touch a transaction when back in the day I could do everything from start to finish and this was no big deal? And I don't think it necessarily means that we're all being so inefficient, even though I think there's some inefficiencies that are in these new systems. I do think that there's also a level of saying, hey, in order to scale, we do need to break this into an assembly line and figure out who can stay in their lane and just focus on their craft so that we can scale the business. And I think there's something to be said about how you can swing too far in one direction and swing too far in the other. And I think that some teams have swung too far in maybe the assembly line direction. And then there are teams that you deal with that I think, some of the top brokers in the industry, they barely have any infrastructure. And doing a deal with them can be an absolute nightmare because
nobody's organized.
There's nobody, but they're getting the deals done and they don't have to pay anybody out, and so it works for them. And their clients don't think they're suffering because of the fact that they're running things differently.
Yeah,
right?
Got it.
And we all know who those people are, and I think that's incredible, and I look at them and I admire them. I'm also on a TV show and I have all these other things going on, so for me it's figuring out how to make sure I give the right attention to each piece of
that must be very tough when you're shooting and also having to get on phone calls and give updates and negotiations. I would imagine that's a very exhausting juggle.
Yeah, the first year, especially for me, was difficult because of the fact that I felt like I had to be so present in everything. And the best way to put it is that everything took a lot out of me. And I felt like when the cameras were on, I felt really like I had to make sure that I was at a level that's almost like that level where you're burning through cortisol at such a rapid rate that it's like when it's over, you're so exhausted. And but listen, what's incredible is that before the show aired, I was able to like triple my personal business, which was great. And I think it just came also from that energy of somebody saying, hey, you're like good enough to be on this show. And that just gave me that confidence.
That's amazing. And it really is a checkbox. That's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about what it was like working for another team as an agent.
Well, what was unique about the second team that I joined, because I feel like that was really a team. My first job in real estate was really being a right hand. So I would say we were a team in the sense that we were two people, but it was somebody who was a rainmaker and really doing the business and somebody who was servicing the business and maybe doing a couple of their own deals on the side when time permitted. And then my second team experience was really being on a team where, you have major producers, real rainmakers, and really seeing what that takes. And then this structure of having a team where that the rainmakers really are the focal point, and that they're making it rain. And I think that that's really incredible to see. And they have incredible business. So, for me, it was just interesting. And I think that I grew a lot and did a ton of business. We did a ton of business together, and that was awesome. And we learned a lot from each other. I came in as the most senior agent as far as years in the business when I joined the team, and that was when we were founding everything. So it was really neat to see everything grow and see what that looked like.
So what was your driving force behind your move back to Elliman?
Well, I think, let's just say.
Because you started here at Elliman.
I started at Elliman, and I always loved Elliman. I was never anybody who had any complaints. But I also don't generally have tons of complaints. I'm like, listen.
It's that Midwestern.
Yeah, exactly. I'm Midwestern. And you know what? I control my own reality. It's really like, listen, you can find something to complain about every company. And I never had that. I had good relationships. Yeah. I think I was also looked on as like kind of the child of that particular office, in the sense that they all watched me grow up, know?
Which broker were you at with Elliman?
I was with Sabrina Saltiel.
She's amazing.
She's incredible. And we were, we still have an incredible relationship to this day. She's a super special person. And it was like, I was 25 when I started with her. And so they all saw me get engaged, get pregnant. And, you end up with this community of brokers. And so if anything, when I left, I realized that I didn't even appreciate enough how incredible that community was. And going to a more transient environment at Compass, it was just not something that I was really ready for, because I had valued the relationship so much. And, Compass was growing so rapidly. And for me, that just wasn't my place. So, and they're doing incredible things, and it worked for them. And it does work for them, clearly, whatever's going on there. And so, the going out and saying, I've got to make a change and I've got to decide to take the leap. Elliman is a place where I knew I was going to be supported, and I also knew there was familiarity. And as you know, with the years in the business, there is a very steep curve if you do change companies. And
it usually takes about 6 months to relaunch in a new firm. And I think Elliman, if I'm going to be an independent contractor, I kind of want to be with the 100-pound gorilla. Mm-hmm. So to me, Elliman has always been that major force.
Yeah. And there's a deep bench of real talent.
I think it's a phenomenal company, and I think it's entrepreneurial, yet it still has a brand face that's 41% market share.
And incredible PR, by the way, and incredible resources and real access to the
actual heads who run the company, which I think is
really
saying
unique,
a lot.
Which is really unique.
Very unique. I left the day Barbara Corcoran left. I did not want to be owned by Sendance. So I love the fact that Elliman has held on to their mom and pop, if you will, ownership. What do you personally find most rewarding about brokerage?
I think the things that are the most rewarding about brokerage are pretty intermittent, in the sense that I think, and because we're all in such a state of addiction to it, that we have just when you think you can't take it anymore, you have a really great moment where a client texts you or calls you and says, like, thank you so much for doing that, and you did an amazing job, and I really loved working with you. Or even in the situation of what's gone on with my career as of recent, I've had some really amazing clients reach out and just say, like, I'm so happy to see that you've, have seen you from the beginning, and you really deserve it, and we're really excited for you. And so I think with brokerage is, I think, and you probably feel the same way, that it's a lot of, getting up every day and putting a smile on your face and enjoying the parts that you find enjoyable. For me, it's being with the people, it's getting out there on appointments, it's showing property and learning the market. The rest of it, I think we're all trying to get to a point where we don't have to do as much of the rest of it, but there is always a lot of the rest of it.
Yeah.
And then I think we have these great fleeting moments that really reinforce that this is what we're really meant to be doing. For me, it's fun to be on the TV show because of the fact that I do feel like I was meant to perform in some way. So that's been really fun. And then also kind of seeing how that all reinforces the way we do brokerage, because I do feel like now when I am in situations, I'm like, if the camera was on me, what would I say right now?
That's a really smart way to actually turn it.
We all need to think that way. We all need to think about everybody listening to our every word, which I kind of always have, but now I really think about that.
Yes, it's quite voyeuristic. What's the biggest lesson you've learned since being in the business?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that you never know where your business is going to be coming from. And
100%
I think we all
agree with
think
you.
that we can be super strategic in our relationships and that we can, but the truth is as the same in high school, you should be nice to every freaking person in your high school class because you never know who's going to be super successful. It's the same with all your leads, and every lead needs to be treated like it's a $500 million lead. And that's the only way I think to really capitalize on all the referrals that come in.
I think that's brilliant. I think that's spot on. What new developments in the city are you most excited about?
Well, I was
plug.
Exactly. I was very excited to see you at 53 West 53rd Street. I'm really excited to see what you guys are doing there with the staging and all of the relaunching that you're doing. It's such a beautiful product and so well built. I mean, very, very unique and special. And I was, we were there with some of those clients that I had in from out of town, which was really amazing. And then, of course, I have a really great project that's on 23rd Street right now, where we are, we're doing closings. It's completely finished. Very low monthlies. It's 139 East 23rd Street, Gramercy North. And so that is where I have a major push right now. And those are affordable luxury. Very, very
Love that.
Great product starting at $2.4 million. And, we're excited. We're excited to, I brought that with me to Elliman. And that's been something that we are just there. We're moving inventory there.
Nice. If you had to choose a townhouse or a penthouse, what would it be and why?
I think for me, it would definitely be a penthouse. I love townhouses, but the not having to deal with the maintenance for me would be amazing. Yeah. And it is inspiring to have views. I have to say, I never really gave that enough credit when I was younger. And now that we have views, I do enjoy it in the morning.
Difference.
Sit, meditate, look out. It's beautiful.
So what's your morning ritual?
I have this famous crazy morning ritual where I do wake up very early and I get up and I meditate. And I spend at least 15 to 20 minutes meditating. I either do a Tony Robbins sequence that's called priming, which I'm really into. I don't do that every day because there's not enough real meditation time in it, but it is great to set yourself up, especially if you're tired, because it kind of pulls you out into a good energy state, and it focuses on gratitude and then also focuses on goals for the day, which I think all of us recentering on gratitude is really important in the morning, and that's what I try to focus on just because it's the only way to kind of keep yourself in a good mood sometimes in this business.
Yep.
And then I do work out in the morning. I try to do that super early as well so that by the time my kids are up and having breakfast, I'm,
done.
Up and around. Exactly, done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a bunch of herbs and Chinese herbs and supplements and stuff I take in the morning. I drink tea. I don't drink coffee. And then it's basically like a race to get out the door.
Got it. Do you find that I find that I do it and I'm really tired at the end of the month if I'm getting up at 5:30 to do my meditation, my journaling, my workout. Right. I'm really tired. By 9 o'clock, my eyes are propped open with toothpicks. So I find that I ebb and flow in my ability to wake up and do it all. I find sometimes now I need to actually take a minute.
Yeah.
Not all the time.
I agree with you.
It's hard to maintain, I find sometimes. $1 Million Listing New York has been a boys' club for nearly a decade. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you ultimately got the role and the impact you think it has on women in the business? I'm very pro-women, in case you haven't noticed.
Well, the thing with casting is you never really know what's going on. And so I can tell you I have no idea what goes on behind the scenes. I don't know any more now than I did then. What I did do was I was very clear about the fact that I really wanted it and that I was willing to kind of just, I don't know how to put this, but that I have the relationships in the industry, that I have overlap with all the cast members, and that I can talk the talk, I can walk the walk, and that I was really ready to go all in. And then in addition to that, I think, there's always a factor of the camera and how you are on camera. I've never really spent a ton of time on camera until now, but and that's something that I think you either have or you don't, and I was probably lucky with that, in that, I know how to bring the energy to the camera, and the camera only likes energy. It doesn't like anything but that, and so that worked out really well. So I'm assuming that's what it was. And then what's been great is that the boys have each welcomed me with their own way of welcoming me, and I have a great relationship with Ryan, and he's been super, super supportive and incredibly mentor-like in giving me advice about even during my process of the move and just kind of what to expect, even though Ryan doesn't actually remember life before $1 Million Listing, and neither does Frederick. So it's kind of hard to get advice from them, whereas Tyler actually remembers life before it. And
Steve, too, I would imagine.
Right. Steve, too. Tyler really loves it, though. And so he has more fun sitting and just really going deep with me on overanalyzing everything, which I have to say is like, I love that about Tyler. We can just go deep about all of it, which I don't think anybody else is really excited to listen to.
In the premiere, Ryan calls you a shark. It is probably surprising, as you know, as I've been referred to similar things. Kidding. But seriously, in this business, not kidding, sometimes you need to take the gloves off, and especially if you're a woman. Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think as a woman, and there's so many books and studies about this, we can say the same thing a man says in a certain situation and it's taken as super aggressive. And I think that's just how it is. I recently had a very aggressive interview I was referring to you about, I was talking to you about before, and it was the same kind of, but the question was posed to me in a much more aggressive manner that was kind of like, are you ashamed of the fact that they're calling you a shark? And I thought, I don't think you really understand the industry I'm in. Like developers wouldn't want to work with me if they felt like
you were a guppy.
And if they felt like when things got close to closing, I just kind of didn't really feel like being aggressive, and so I just let it go. But this is something that I think you and I are still pushing the envelope on from a female perspective, because even though this industry is filled with women, when it comes to this, even just talking about developers or talking about these really big clients, in order to close those deals, I do think that some masculine energy or taking your feminine force and putting it forward in an aggressive manner just has to happen. And so you kind of have to embrace it.
But why is it a negative connotation? I find that so provocative. If a man is outspoken, isn't he great? Right. If a woman is outspoken, God, she's difficult.
Yeah.
I find that a real play on what makes people comfortable and feel safe when they see someone say what they think, not necessarily what they want to hear.
Yeah, and I think for both of us, the only way to really get to the top is to learn how to read the room and really know where you can be who you
and when to tone it down.
When to tone it down. And I think that's gets you very, very far as being a woman. And
know
so
your audience.
I read the room, and I don't go for it if I know I'm not in that place yet with my confidence where I'm just going to go with it and be like, I don't care what anybody thinks. Oh. I'm like, you know what? This room's not ready for that. And it would be better if I said it in this way, and then maybe I need to go to the other people separately, one by one, in my own special way, and see if I can turn the neck instead of trying to turn the head. And, I have a European husband, and, he's incredibly supportive and awesome, but I don't just necessarily hit him over the head with a baseball bat when I want something. I figure out how to,
so
hey,
you've learned how to adjust yourself.
Yeah.
Has he highlighted that to you?
He loves it. Like when we moved in together, I was like, listen, this is great. But if you don't propose within a year, I'm just going to take my belongings and I'll leave. I'm not saying there's any pressure. I'm just saying I just won't be here. And I'm not bringing any furniture, so I'll make it easy for you. And he still refers to that, and it was so smart. I'm like, yeah, because if I had done it in that super aggressive way, somehow that wouldn't have been okay. But it's the same message.
You and I are very similar. I did a very similar thing.
It's like, listen, I just won't be here anymore.
You're a serial monogamist, and I don't have time to muck about. So, you have a year. Take your time. No problem. But I may not be.
Exactly.
Here. So going back to your process, you are quite an accomplished athlete. You were the national champion for race walker in a different life. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I don't think many people know that. I didn't.
It's a totally a weird sport, and it's a very big niche of a sport because so the way that it works with track and field is that every single event gets there's three places, right? First, second, and third. And in track and field in high school, every event was worth equal points. So the long jump's worth the same amount of points. the shot puts worth around the same amount of points. The race walk was also worth the same amount of points and was a sport that my late coach actually he actually was very, very good at coaching it. And so his daughter was very good at the race walk, and she was a couple years ahead of me. And so he was able to prime and teach, both his daughters were good at the race walk, and he was able to teach everybody how to teach women who weren't really good at anything else to be good at the race walk if they had the right form for it, because it's a very form-focused event. You can get disqualified if you don't have the right form. And so what happened was, it was a similar thing with me where I wasn't really a good runner, but for some reason my body worked really well for the race walk. So when I got into the race walk, it was a very beginner's luck moment because I basically came in and won. I was in the second heat, and that means that you're in the second group, which is the slower group. But they put me in the second heat thinking I wasn't really that good, and I won my heat, which was for me a really big moment. And I think that in real estate, there's a big thing to be said about getting some beginner's luck at the beginning of your career, and how that sets you up, kind of like your first hit. You're never going to maybe feel as excited about that ever again, but it's that beginner's luck. And so for me, that was the same thing. I had this beginner's luck of winning this first heat that I did and realized that I was going to be good enough if I trained. And then what was incredible about that was that I realized also that I wasn't going to be able to train as much as everybody else to be able to be good. I had to train twice as much. So what I would do is towards the end of the last couple of years when I was really competing at a high level, because again, my coach realized that he could get these women to be good at the race walk and then they would win because nobody else was doing it. And so we would win these points that were equal to somebody winning the mile, which
smart.
was super big. And then it ended up being that we got to the state level. So I won. So then in high school, at junior year, I think I got like 6th place at the states and 12th place at the nationals.
Wow.
And then my senior year, I won the states
the
night before, and then I won the nationals the next day. But that was because I double trained that year. Like I would literally come home from school, I would eat dinner after training I would train in the afternoons after school, eat dinner, and then I would train again at night, which seems crazy, but it was what I knew I needed to do, and then I won.
So how does it work? You just literally walk?
Yeah, you walk as fast as you can, and then you have to lock your knee every time your leg comes back. So if you look at race walkers, you'll see that they lock their knee every time their leg comes back, and then you can never have 2 feet off the ground at the same time.
Wow.
And so, which is actually harder than it looks, because to keep your feet on the ground, you have to kind of keep this form. So I had really good form. I was never disqualified, and it just was
Do you still do it?
I mean, I do it here and there, but I have to say, running is just so much more efficient in some ways. The race walking is something that you're doing because it's like the way that you do the triple jump. No one triple jumps for fun. It's like you do it because that's the event.
Requirement.
Whereas that's the same with the race walk.
Got it. Do you find that running's hard on your body?
Yeah, running is definitely not what I should be doing. It's something I do a couple days a week just to keep, because I love it, but eventually I'll have to phase it out.
Okay, so now here's another paradigm of questions. If you weren't in real estate, what would you do for work, Kirsten?
I have to say that if I wasn't in real estate, I would be a motivational speaker, and I would be like a female Tom Ferry or Tony Robbins or Gabby Byrne, whatever it is. I don't know if I'm spiritual enough for Gabby, but I could go there. I could try. But that's what I would love to do.
So you're a big Tony Robbins fan. You go to their seminars. They're very good. I've been to one.
Yeah, I did UPW.
Did you walk the fire?
I did. I walked the fire. I did UPW. I'm signed up for Business Mastery whenever it reopens again. And then, I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan because it's, first of all, his stuff I've always found very accessible to listen to and very easy to turn on and off. And so I loved reinforcing it during quarantine. It was really good for me. Like I felt like I literally steeped myself in that during quarantine. I feel like I came out in a really good place mentally.
Yeah. Do you ask your team to subscribe to it?
We do Tom Ferry right now because of the fact that they're so organized with team coaching, and I really like them. Specifically for me, starting a team for the first time, I wanted something that was going to be really specific to teams. So we've been really, really enjoying that for now. So we'll see. They have a ton of resources that I haven't even tapped into. We've just been using it from an accountability perspective and to help us with high level on organization.
Got it. Makes sense. When you're not working, what do you like to do?
That's such a good question because I don't really know anymore. I think Like, I feel like, especially coming from having my husband be European where people are well-rounded, it's very hard for me because people are like, what's your hobby? I'm like, well, I guess exercise and Pilates can't really be a hobby because it's like just like maintenance.
Because they understand pleasure.
They do. They do.
They have mastered pleasure.
They have. And I swung to that end of things when my kids were very little in the sense that we would travel much more. Like I would go to Europe during February break with the kids. And so I would say, for me, I love cross-country skiing. I'm a big, big cross-country skiing fan. And for me, that worked really well. I'm good at rollerblading and skating. So for me, like all that was really works with me. And I love it because it's so much more efficient than downhill skiing. And where we are, we have a place in Switzerland that's right next to a big cross-country ski slope. So that's what I do when I'm there. And I feel like between that and running, I do enjoy the occasional running race just because of the fact that I love that. That's kind of where the hiking, we love hiking. We do a lot of that. But then when I get over there, it's like part of it's like the fun part about this is we hike to the top and then we drink and we eat lunch and then we like all
Honey,
walk down.
I'm with you. Your husband also works at Douglas Elliman. Do you work together?
So my husband's a real estate developer, and he has been in the business just like me in New York for the 13 years. We literally moved here at the same exact time to New York City. He was working for a major developer in Chicago doing international sales for 5 years before it, and then moved here and literally has been in business for himself since.
Wow.
So, for me, having him have his license, having him be really a high-level consultant for the team has been really helpful. He's just aware of kind of always what's going on. We do have a couple of his projects. It's really kind of being able to have him around when I need him because we've been working together on so many levels that it's just really helpful. He doesn't come to the office. He does very much all of his own other business, but I do find it great to have somebody around who does have a very deep knowledge of the marketplace and understands also the commercial space and can really handle some of those larger buyers if for any reason I can't be there.
Got it. So you don't feel like it's too much in the same forum all the time?
Oh, it's definitely too much. It's not a good idea. I wouldn't advise anybody to do this. But we are both in real estate, and so there's also this level of understanding that's like, if this is what
Church
it takes.
and state, right?
Yeah. And there is no real separation because it is so, a lot of my clients know him because of me. And so it's very easy to say, hey, you can talk to Stefano as well. He's very well versed. And sometimes people will come to me through Stefano in the sense that they will call him first and want his advice first. So we just roll with it.
That's the juggle. All right, here it is. What's your biggest vice?
My biggest vice is, it really is wine, to be totally honest. In the end, I think all of us.
Red, white, Alsatian, what are we dealing with
I
here?
would say really good red in the winter and then really crisp light white in the summer. But I think at this point, that's the vice. Everybody would be like, some people are like carbs. I'm like, no, I can give it pretty much anything. But being able to have, my measured amount of alcohol that I have each week to just take the edge off, that works for me.
Got it. I would have to say I had a lot of fun today getting to just know you a little bit more. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be here.
Well, thank you for having me. This was really fun. We're going to have to now go out and get some wine.
100%.